Hi there, it's Elaine Hamilton Grundy from the Reiki Centre, and today I'd like to talk about this concept of the new earth. It's something that Eckhart Tolle started talking about. He coined it in his book, A New Earth, that was published in 2005. And a lot of spiritual teachers have been talking about this new kind of, not even new, but this coming into more and more alignment with our authentic selves. And I'm talking about it because a lot of people in my circle anyway have seen or are seeing 2020 as a very significant kind of gathering of this energy. So, depending on what you're reading and what kind of circles you're involved with, some people are talking about it like a kind of split in the timeline. So, there's this idea that there are now so many of us that are involved in this kind of work that we are actually starting to see this widening of the gap between people who are still involved in the old way of doing things and a growing group of people that are starting to look at things differently and do things differently. So the reason why I'm talking about it is because I have seen and I am also experiencing an acceleration of this process since the beginning of this year. So for many of you, you would have felt that same kind of anticipation, beginning of 2020, really exciting, really great. And I know for me, I had this huge feeling of optimism and just like, oh, this is going to be great. And I can get rid of all my old baggage and I'm going to feel better. Because the last couple of years have been pretty tough for many of us energetically. And then what happened is 2020 arrived, and if anything, if you're experiencing similar symptoms to me, it seems to have got even worse in a sense. And I've been seeing this with my clients as well, or people that are coming in and they're very confused, and there seems to be an awful lot of kind of shedding. And with that shedding, a lot of feelings of vulnerability, a lot of feelings of sadness. One of the terms I recently came across was melancholy. And this sums it up for me perfectly. It's like just this overriding sense of kind of, it's like, what is happening? And there's no particular reason for it or cause for it. So today I'd like to talk a little bit about my feelings around what's happening and how we can align more fully into this expansion of energy that we're seeing. So essentially, like some people are talking about it like a literally split, like a split in the timeline where there's kind of like one group of people continuing along the way that we have always done things. So the old systems, old government structures, capitalism, material possessions, achievement and success defined by money and defined by the paradigms that have been set by our parents and our parents before us, and etc., etc. So there's this idea that the old way is continuing, and then there's been this kind of split off as a new way has begun to come into consciousness for more and more people. So that is one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is that this idea of coming into our authentic being, this idea that it's not me, it's us, it's we, it's the whole, it's the planet, it's all that reside on the planet, it's me, it's you, it's the whole, because we understand that we are part of that. Now, this is something that many of us believe, and what I feel is happening is that this belief system, so people like Eckhart Tolle, who have really been one of the pioneers of this, and many other spiritual teachers are talking about this as well, the oneness, right? Like we are all connected, and what we do counts, it matters. The ripple effect that we have on our environment, on ourselves, on our business partners, on our daily lives, it really has consequence and impact. So this idea of what are we rippling out, has been around forever, you know, I mean, this is not new, but the difference is the amount of people now engaged in actively, consciously caring about it has reached what I would call like the tipping point. So, this idea of the morphic field has now become so large. There are so many of us engaged in this. It's not only spiritual teachers talking about oneness anymore. It's, you know, we have these conversations over coffee. We have these conversations just, it infuses so much of our lives, not only if you're in the spiritual field, but also when you are talking to colleagues. Businesses are now looking at this in terms of how do they impact the community more ethically. You know, that our planet is crying out for it in terms of the environment. And so everywhere we look, in every industry, in every aspect of our life, there is this expansion of awareness into the oneness and the connectivity of everything. So as this expands, there are kind of two themes that I see coming through that we really need to identify and stand firm in order for this transition period or this expansion period to go as smoothly as possible. And my feeling is that people are struggling because they've still got one foot in the old paradigm, the old way of doing things, the old cultural and societal norms that are kind of pulling us back. And then on the other hand, we've got another foot into this idea of no, everything is connected and my expression of life and my potentiality is a very important contribution to that. So as the timelines, if you like, are kind of moving further and further apart, it's becoming more and more difficult for us to find our footing. So you might have this experience of almost like a feeling of detachment. And this feeling of detachment is literally you're detaching from the old ways of being. So if perhaps in the past you would have got involved in somebody's drama or maybe family drama or friendship groups or whatever it is, you're noticing now that you are less indulgent of it, you're less curious about it, you're actually less interested, you don't want to get involved. And that level of detachment means that you're pulling back from it and able to look at it from, it's not a non-caring viewpoint, but it's just a non-engaged viewpoint. So you're much less engaged in it. People are also saying that they're really craving more alone time. They don't want to be in communities that they used to find really interesting before. They're no longer interested in it. Other people are just noticing that it's a lot more energetically difficult to hold positions that they used to hold very naturally. And this is because we are really being called now into our authentic expression. So what is it that is our truth? And for many of us, we haven't really been called like that before. It's not something that we've really had to think about because we're always doing what other people want us to do. We grow up in an environment where we do what our parents want us to do, and then we go into school and we do what school wants us to do, then we get a job and we do what the job wants us to do, etc., etc., etc. And this is about coming into our own center and first making decisions about our own well-being and our own direction and our own truth first, then expressing it out. So in many ways it's a real flip of what we've been taught to do. So for many of us, it's a really weird space to be in because we are not quite sure how that looks. We're not necessarily quite sure what it is we want. For many of us, we struggle when we are not thinking about other people's needs. We struggle to really identify, okay, if I'm not thinking about other people's needs, what are my needs? And coming into that truth of what it is that brings you joy. And then through that, expressing it outwards to other people and not expressing it out like you have to join me, but just expressing it, this is my joy. That's it. And Some people are going to like it, some people are not going to like it. You will notice as you express from your truth, the people that are used to you doing what they want you to do are going to start getting upset. So that level of detachment is part of that process of pulling back from that. There's also another very important distinction in this, in that as we're doing this, our hearts remain open. So the detachment I'm referring to is not a closing down of the heart. It is an opening of the heart. And that opening of the heart allows you to see that all is welcome. Like all is fine and all is allowed. So let's say you're involved in there's some drama going on in the family, and there's 3 or 4 people with different opinions, and they're kind of, this is my opinion and you have to agree with it. And the other person's like, no, this is my opinion, you have to agree with it. And you can sit and see that all opinions are relevant to that person. Like if someone feels very strongly that they're right, then they are clearly right for themselves. And there's no wrongness in that. The huge shift that we're going through is there is not one right and there is not one wrong. There is all, the totality of it. And it's about coming together and really hearing each other's viewpoints, but also trying to make all of it okay. Right? So it's okay, whatever your orientation, it's okay, whatever your background, it's okay, whatever your culture, whatever your upbringing, all of it is okay. And when you come into that space of it, your heart does open. So the trick here is to continue to open your heart and continue to express your individual truth. And this, we've been reading about it and listening to people say this for yonks, but the coming into it, this is the embodiment phase now. This is why it's so uncomfortable, because we are now being called to embody what the theory suggests, which means no judgment, right? And that's actually pretty difficult to do. If you start to notice the dramas in your life, what if it's all right? Like they're right, you're right, everybody's right. And being able to sit in that space. So the distinction really is having an open heart and being able to give unconditional love. But unconditional love is not the same as unconditional giving. So for many of us, when we come into this space, we're like, oh, I have to unconditionally love, so whatever anybody else's needs are, I need to meet them. No, because you cannot have that and be in your authentic self. So these two things, this is the balance. How do I keep my heart open to all and everybody, and at the same time express my own personal, individual expression of life? Now, your own individual expression of life must come first. And as it comes out, here's the tricky balancing part. It comes out, but there is no need, you have no need for anybody else to agree with you, to validate you, to attach any kind of significance to what you're saying. You're just speaking your own truth. That's it. And your own truth has enough solidity and centeredness in your system that you do not need anybody else to agree with you. It's simply your expression of who you are. So when you stand in that, then you allow everybody else to stand in theirs. So as you're expressing your truth as your truth, when somebody else expresses their truth that is perhaps fundamentally different from the way you see things, you acknowledge and love the fact that they have their own expression. And so in that sense, there's no need for you to give more of yourself than you want to. And it's up to them to get their own needs met. It's up to them to come into their own truth of themselves and not need you to validate them. And that energy is what we're sitting in now. So that's why this year feels so difficult, because we're being asked to be very courageous. We're being asked to come into our own truth, to speak our own truth, and to not need anybody else to validate, agree, or follow us, right? We're doing what we feel is the right thing to do. And if somebody else doesn't feel it's the right thing to do, if somebody else disagrees with us, or if somebody else tries to convince us that their way is the correct way, then that's fine. It's really not a big deal. And we literally congratulate them for having their own truth, and we have our own truth, and we perhaps find ourselves going in different directions. So the other thing I would say is, around this time, community is very important. Make sure you are also finding a community that is speaking to you and allowing you to stand in your own truth. So for many of us, we are noticing that some of our communities are breaking down, others are becoming more important, and yet others are finding that they're kind of not in anything because the old communities have broken down. They haven't found their new communities yet. So there's also a calling to be very honest with yourself and patient and trusting. So as we sit and allow this new energy to really come in, and for our truth to really start to express more steadily and more centered in our system, then there is also going to be a time where we have to let go of the old. And as we let go of the old, the new hasn't come in yet. So there may well be a huge feeling of vulnerability and grief at having to let go of the old system. Even though it didn't particularly serve us, there was a sort of feeling of safety or a feeling of security around what was known. The way it's been coming to me when I've been doing healing is people really having to kind of step out of these prisons. So it's coming in terms of like cages or like boxes, or like, I'm very visual when I do healing, but it's that kind of thing where they're just opening the door and they're just stepping out. But as they step out, they have to kind of really come from within. So the light is coming from within us outwards. Whereas the old paradigm, we were kind of caging ourselves in our belief structures and our communities and surrounding ourselves with people that agreed with us. So then we had that safety and validation coming from other people. Like, this is my community, they agree with me, and we're all doing the same thing, so therefore I must be right. Now, the new way is the rightness comes from in here. So it's just your rightness. And if other people agree with you, great. But if they don't, it doesn't matter. So you don't need other people to validate you and to build your sense of rightness around. So it's a really, really opposite way of looking at things. It's really a sense of coming into your full expression of your own authentic self. And I know I've been banging on about this for a long time, but it's very profound. And it really is the complete opposite of how we're used to doing things. So for those of you who are feeling a great sense of loss or confusion or vulnerability, almost like you feel naked, because you've stepped out of your box and you're just like, okay, what's happening now? And you have a light, but it's not fully kind of used to shining on its own. This is where all that kind of scariness is coming in, because it is scary. We're moving into a very, very different paradigm of how we do things. And this shift is an ongoing thing until you can stand really solidly. When you can stand really solidly in your own power, none of this is going to bother you anymore. But until that happens, you like, join the club, right? We're all kind of finding our way around, and I really hope you just keep in your intention to find a community of like-minded people who are really there to encourage your own individual journey with no preconceived belief structures to hang on to. just really being allowed to come into your own truth, and the people you're with allowed to come into their own truth, whatever that is, and a we hold a joint space that really allows that to happen. I think that's a really powerful way of coming into this space. And if you don't have anything like that, if you don't have your own community, the wonderful thing with the internet is a global community, and there are many, many communities online that are really holding this kind of space. So go find that kind of community as well to grow. But I hope this has been helpful, and hopefully it explains a little bit of the turmoil or the kind of upside downness that is going on at the moment. Thanks for watching.